Tell the truth. Have you ever watched an ACC football game from beginning to end? And what I mean by that is two ACC teams playing one another. Have you watched Michigan and Ohio State? Yeah, probably. When's the last time you sat down and watched Florida State, Florida? Excuse me, Florida State, Miami. It's probably been a while, right? And the whole game, that's the problem right now in the ACC. And I'm going to tell you how they have sewn themselves up into a real problem for about another 15 years. Stick with me as I tell you about that. Hey, listen, pick up DAWGSTRUCTION. You want to get this before G Day. Want to make sure that you're grabbing that and you've got it in hand for any autographs that come up during G Day. The link is down below. Make sure you're flipping through it when you pick it up at the Red Zone over in Athens. It's a great book. Obviously, we've talked about it a lot, and a lot of y'all continue to buy it, which I'm appreciative of. And to the year 2000, the ACC had a contract that was worth $55 million a year more than the SEC. And that continued until the SEC renegotiated its contract with Disney, getting rid of JP Sports and all that whole package, rolled all of that into the SEC on ESPN, and created the SEC network soon thereafter, and that resulted in the SEC going from a $100 million contract to a $205 million contract. Soon thereafter, the ACC formed the ACC network, and in 2019, excuse me, 2000, I believe it was 2018 or 19, the SEC was still a $205 million contract a year with ESPN, Disney, and CBS, and the ACC had gone past it with $238 million a year. Now, the ACC had Notre Dame to include in that for its non-football home games. Excuse me, for its everything but its football home games. Notre Dame is included in the ACC contract. So it's a little bit of apples to applesauce, but it's the same basic thing. Now, stick with me here. A couple of years ago, when the ACC formed the ACC network, they did so on linear television, a cable network. So they wanted to be like the SEC. They had to really sell their soul out to get that. And what happened was that each ACC school from the year 2020 to the year 2034 has negotiated all of its rights. Every single home athletic event, whether it's lacrosse or football, an ACC school has to broadcast that on Disney's network. So that means ABC or the family of ESPN networks. The SEC, and so that comes into about for the ACC roughly $238 million a year. Broken down, that's not quite 30 million. It's $29 million a year per school in the ACC. The SEC just negotiated a contract with Disney to have every single sporting event, just like the ACC, on Disney television, on Disney airwaves or television. So that means every single Georgia, Florida, every single Auburn, Alabama, those games will all almost certainly now be on ABC. CBS is out of the ballgame. Well, why do that? Because they earned upwards or a minimum $450 million a year. These numbers are not including Texas and Oklahoma. Keep that in mind. So the ACC right now, an ACC school is going to pull in $29 million a year between now and the year 2034. Okay, that's $435 million in broadcasting rights for those schools. $29 million a year between now and 2034. The SEC's deal per school goes from $45 million, so about $16 million a year more than the ACC right now, to $60 million a year. In other words, more than doubling the ACC's intake. Now, that, again, does not include Texas and Oklahoma. So, in the future, do not be surprised when you see Kentucky have a better football program than Virginia Tech, very possibly than Florida State, and possibly right up there with Clemson, or Clemson regresses. Now, why? Why is this the case? Well, money matters. I mean, it just does. And when you're talking about a deficit of $405 million minimum over the next 15 years, you could build an entirely new stadium if you were South Carolina, okay, with cash. If you are Georgia, you could, I don't even know what you'd do with $405 million. That would build three or probably three new basketball facilities if you wanted them. All right. New Stegman, just lift the roof off and redo everything. So why does this matter? Because of the way the ACC did their television contract, and because there was so much trouble in getting the linear deal done, in other words, the ACC network, they locked themselves into a 15-year deal where even adding Notre Dame will be minimum. It's and frankly, Notre Dame would demand that money because we know how Notre Dame is with their football. They want independence. They want their own money. They want to do things the way they want to do them. So over a 15-year period, people would say, well, that's not that much money. That's not that much difference. To which I would say, let's go back 15 years from now. Let's look at Georgia Tech in 2006. Let's look at Virginia Tech in 2006. Let's look at Florida State even in 2007. They weren't in the positions they're in right now. Right now, those three schools on the national level are completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. Let's look back 15 years from now at the 2007 season for Georgia. They were playing in the Sugar Bowl. How about Alabama? The next year they won they played for the SEC championship, and 2 years after that they played for the national championship and won it. What about the Gators? They were winning the national championship in 2006 and 8. What about LSU? They won the national championship in 2007. Things haven't really changed in the SEC with the exception of adding Texas A&M and Mizzou. So for folks who really care about this sort of thing and are really still into what you would call an ACC SEC rivalry, it doesn't really exist. I mean, when you look at the programs that play one another every single year, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky's clearly the better program there. Florida, Florida State, it's amazing, but Florida's the better program there, and that's probably going to get a lot worse over time unless Mike Norvell really figures it out quick. Georgia, Georgia Tech, that's a great example of stuffing somebody's face into the dirt and being done with them for good because Georgia Tech is going to have a hard time recovering from this predicament. And then Clemson, South Carolina. Well, listen, Clemson's had a great 10-year run or whatever it's been. Yeah, a 10-year run, say really about the last six. But South Carolina is not going to be as bad as they've been over the last few years forever. And will they compete for national championships? I don't think so. But closing the gap between Carolina and Clemson is not exactly the most challenging thing on earth, if you ask me. It's right there for the taking. And if you have almost a $500 million lead on them over a 15-year period, you should really get better. What's the other thing that we've noticed that's changed a lot? And this audience doesn't care about this, but it's noticeable. Basketball. This season and these last few seasons, the SEC has caught up to the ACC in basketball. Now, it's harder to say that now that we've got Duke and Carolina playing in the Final Four, but blue bloods are going to blue blood. That's what it is. Alabama, if they were in the ACC, would still be Alabama, right? But what we're seeing now is an SEC that's become extremely serious about basketball. And over this past year, say 3 years, we've seen the SEC really come a long way in basketball. Where is some of that $500 million money going? It's going to basketball. It's going to facilities and football. And when you start talking about the arms race, places like Virginia Tech, Miami, I mean, Miami desperately needs $60 million a year from broadcasting rights. They don't have it. A lot of the ACC schools, in addition, they don't have fan bases like Clemson or, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Miami, even Florida State. They don't have a donor base that you can go to like you do at Georgia, LSU, the Gators, Tennessee, Alabama. You can make a few coaching mistakes in terms of hires in the SEC when you're pulling in 60 mil a year minimum. That these numbers do not include what will come to fruition with Texas and Oklahoma. You can make mistakes and get away with it. If you wonder why the two conferences are going different ways, That's the reason. Popularity, which equals to TV exposure, which equals to revenue. These are all interconnected. It's a straight direct line. There's no confusion about why this league is has had 3 years in a row of national champions from different programs. 3 straight years. The ACC hasn't won 3 championships from different programs. I don't think I'm not sure that's ever happened in a decade for them. Clemson and Florida State won it this past decade, but no one else did in that league. And the year before that in the 2000s, I don't think Miami was not in the ACC when they won the national championship in 2000. So you get the breadth of it all. You understand what I'm saying? That's a real. If you're Clemson, you need to figure out how to get into the Big Ten, unless it's too far gone, excuse me. They need to get out of that league if they want to have long-term success. That's what I would say. And, they're not really a match for the Big Ten. I know that. The Big 12 has fallen apart. These ACC presidents and chancellors have been outmaneuvered, and it's their fault they're in the predicament they're in. All right, make sure you're checking out DAWGSTRUCTION. The link's down below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.